start the press conference in 1 minute, and the live stream will also start in 1 minute. Good afternoon, dear media, everyone watching us online. Welcome to Riga, which hosted today the meeting between the three Baltic foreign ministers and Foreign Minister of Germany. We'll start the press conference now. We'll start with the statements of the ministers, and then we'll open the floor for questions. We'll start with the statement of Mr. Rinkevich. Good afternoon once again, dear media. This is the second press conference today, as you very well know. We've already answered some of them after the bilateral meetings. Nevertheless, I would like to now underline the regular political consultation outcomes between the Baltic countries and Germany. This was a regular political consultation that we just had in an extended format together with my Baltic colleagues from Estonia and Lithuania. We discussed the current security situation in the region, NATO Madrid summit, and also the issue that we discussed during our bilateral meeting with the German colleague and with my Baltic colleagues were mostly the same. We all agree that the world has changed and Europe has changed after the 24th of February, and these changes require an orthodox response on the part of the alliance. We also discussed issues pertaining to enhanced forward presence of NATO here in the region, and allies have sent additional troops to all three Baltic countries. As you know, in Germany, the framework nation is Germany, in Estonia, the UK, and in Latvia, the EFP battle group is led by Canada. But apart from the presence here, we also discussed about we talked about strengthening of the air defense system, coastal defense arrangements, and reinforce various kinds of forces. And of course, we discussed a lot the support to Ukraine. This is probably one of the topics which is at the moment one of the primary concerns anywhere you go. And I would like to thank my colleagues from other Baltic countries and from Germany for very open discussion. When we have the opportunity to exchange a very specific information on what has been done, basically listing, the military equipment and devices and vehicles and units that we have handed over to Ukraine, and also sharing our agendas and also understanding how important it is to make sure that those supplies are secure, that we shouldn't reveal too much information to hamper the supplies. We have indeed made sure that the exchange of information is very efficient, and we of course talked about what other assistance we should provide to Ukraine and what we should do further. And we also discussed our future strategy with regard to Russia and Belarus. And Russia-Belarus for us is one entity in military and security sense. We must continue sanctions. We must tighten energy sanctions, but we should also work towards enhanced energy independence, and Baltic countries have specific plans for achieving that, and Germany has specific plans for achieving greater energy independence. And although a lot of these activities will require some time. We must nevertheless be aware that Russia will not calm down for some time, even after the military aggression in Ukraine. They will continue to act hostile, so we must rethink our cooperation with Ukraine, and we need to downsize our trade ties with Russia as much as possible. This also concerns our cooperation in the energy sector with Russia, and we had indeed a very good discussion regarding these issues. We will continue our meeting. This is just a slight break between the two sessions of our two meetings. We will discuss relations with China, EU affairs in the second session of our meeting. I know that my colleagues also have a lot to say to you. Therefore, I should stop here and give the floor to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Minister. And now the floor is given to the German Foreign Minister. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon also from me, dear colleagues, dear Edgars, dear Gabrielius, dear Eva Maria. This meeting of the three Baltic states with Germany can look back on a very long-standing tradition. It was established almost 30 years ago, in 1994, that is. However, I think it's fair to say that never has a meeting of this format, taken place in a situation that is comparable to the one we find ourselves in today. Our meeting today follows to a geopolitical watershed. Almost 2 months have passed since the beginning of a criminal war of aggression here in the heart of Europe. In the year 2022, Russia's war fever has caused fear and concern for people in Europe, especially for my generation. Such a war has always been inconceivable. That we now are forced to tell our children over dinner that they need not be afraid of a war, or try, after all, to impress upon them that they need not be afraid. That is something that we would never have believed possible until very recently. But it is the bitter reality of today, and thus it constitutes a turning point for European policy and for German policy. For the people here in Latvia, in Lithuania and Estonia, that fear has always been very much at the forefront of their minds. And it's always been, to some extent, a topic discussed by people at home. We, then again, did not listen closely enough when we heard you share your concern in that regard. This is why I'm here today, talking to you, and will be talking to your people in the neighboring countries tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, trying to put myself in your shoes, trying to feel what you feel. Because in Berlin, too, I hear full well what is being discussed here in these countries. People are concerned and looking with concern to this region, looking at the people look across the green border to Belarus and Russia. However, we've also noticed that the people in the Baltic states are not in a state of shock. However, they are determined to defend their countries and to act together in order to do so. I address myself to my counterparts here, but also to the people in the Baltic states, and to say loud and clear that, yes, we hear you, and be assured Germany stands at your side. Once Russia attacked Ukraine, we enhanced the presence of NATO in the Baltic countries. For 5 years now, Germany has been leading the NATO battle group in Lithuania. More than 900 German troops, men and women, are in situ. In addition, we have also deployed additional air defense forces at the end of the month of March. And this move is an illustration of the fact that we stand at the side of the people in the Baltic countries for their security, but also for the security of all of us. Because what we're talking about is the external European border, a common border. Russia's attack on Ukraine constitutes a watershed moment. We have to rethink Europe's security architecture, and a return to the status quo ante is inconceivable and will not take place. A repositioning, however, and we have to be honest in that regard, will not happen overnight either. It will cost time, and it will require enormous effort, and it will require enormous trust. What we've seen over the last few weeks is that this sense of trust exists between our countries and has grown over the past 30 years. We all are very much aware of what is at stake here. It is the security of our freedom, of the freedom of our lives in the heart of Europe. I recently talked about this and underlined how important it is when I introduced the new German security strategy. I said it is about defending the alliance in Europe, and Germany bears a special responsibility in that regard. We will enhance our contribution to the defense of the alliance. In so doing, we will contribute to the ability of all of us to defend ourselves. But apart from that willingness to defend ourselves, we also need to make our capabilities, the necessary capabilities available, so that we are in a position to defend ourselves. Both things go together. Germany will thus prepare the ground and is preparing the ground for this development, and we will spend significantly more money for defense and will adapt our security policy accordingly. We have increasingly come to realize that the wars of aggressions in this century of ours are always also wars carried out in the sphere of cyberspace. The internet is being used, means like fake news are being used and propaganda is being employed. The reinforcements of our troops present in the eastern part of our alliance, however, have to have a long-term perspective. It is clear, and we talked about this earlier, also in the run-up to the unofficial foreign ministers meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Berlin, we have to say loud and clear that the tripwire logic that we have applied so far, that signal that an attack on one NATO country constitutes an attack on all NATO countries by being present or having a minimum presence in the Baltic states and in Poland, will not suffice in future. To me, it is very important that as we engage in this debate, as we reorient and reposition the alliance and enhance its abilities, we have you on board as people directly affected by what is happening here. Security in Europe, however, also means that we need to reduce our dependency on Russia, especially in the field of energy, and put an end to our dependency in that regard. We all want to phase out Russia, gas imports from Russia, rather today than tomorrow. And you're leading the way in that regard. You have, at an early point in time, shifted your policies and thus reduced your dependency in the field of gas to a very large extent. But you have the pipeline linking Finland and Estonia and the LNG terminal in Klaipėda. We have committed mistakes in that regard, but we cannot go back on what has happened and undo what happened then. What we need to do more than ever is to put an end to our energy imports from Russia. So I want to be very clear here in making the point that Germany too wants to have a complete phasing out of energy imports from Russia. By the end of summer, we want to stop importing coal, having our imports by oil by mid-year and completely stop that import by the end of year. We want to do this in a coordinated way because a complete phasing out of the European Union is what I think will make our strength. Our European response to Putin's war of aggression also needs to be that we aim to further strengthen Europe's sovereignty, not only in issues pertaining to energy. We have to make sure that we no longer depend on one supplier, and we have to completely transition 100% to renewable energies. We decided this as early as in 2014 in the European Union. We now finally have to make things happen. Phasing out fossil energy constitutes or contributes to our security in a twofold manner. Apart from tackling the Russian threat, it will make sure that sustainable security and peace can only be achieved if we fight with determination against the impact of climate change together. Part and parcel of that approach is that we make Europe CO2 neutral as quickly as possible. This again is an area where there is an enormous potential for cooperation between our four countries. The Baltic Sea area constitutes an large-scale energy and peace project right on our doorstep. For me, today constitutes a point of departure for such a joint initiative. Thus, I would like to thank you for having given me the opportunity to have this meeting with you, although times may be more than bitter in the true sense of the term. Dear Edgars, thank you ever so much that you have been so kind to host us here in Riga. Though time is of the essence and we don't have much time for any sightseeing, because this doesn't really belong to the present-day agenda of a foreign minister, we will at least take a short walk through the heart of the old part of the town. Let me be very clear here now. Security is always a question of trust. One has to be visible on the ground. I address myself to the German listeners, to the German audience, and I hope there are quite a few of them here. The Baltic states are a beautiful place where you can spend your holidays over Pentecost during the summer season. It's always worthwhile a visit. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And now we give the floor to the Minister of Lithuania. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear Edgars, for hosting us. Thank you, dear Anna-Lena, for this opportunity to talk and exchange notes. I think we can all agree today that we all live in historic times. Russia's attack on Ukraine is seeking to rewrite the global security order that was carefully built after the Second World War and which, after the Cold War, included our three Baltic states. It is clear that Ukraine's victory is the only way to preserving this order. Victory in the battlefield will show the current aggressors, Russia and Belarus, and all other potential aggressors in the future, that global security order can and will be defended. Failure to do that would be an open invitation for future conflicts, including possibly on NATO territory. Our number one task is to clearly demonstrate that the West, counter to all the expectations of Mr. Putin, is driven by the unity of purpose, determined to do all it takes to defend the security architecture and rules-based way of life. But in order to achieve that, more needs to be done. Ukraine has to have all the means to defend itself. There can be no sliver of doubt as to where do we stand on providing military equipment to Ukraine. Russia must be isolated politically, diplomatically in all international fora, including financial institutions. Within the EU, we have to agree on a new comprehensive package of sanctions as soon as possible, including oil and gas embargo, ban of the remaining Russian and Belarusian banks, as well as broadcasting Russian propaganda channels. Russia's war has fundamentally changed the security situation in the region. Therefore, NATO's decisions at the upcoming NATO summit in Madrid should reflect this changed European security environment and current threats posed by Russia's unprecedented aggression against its neighbors. NATO has to be fully prepared to defend the Baltic states from the very first minutes of conflict. For that, additional deployment of troops, air, maritime defense are absolutely needed. The atrocities of Bucha and other cities show that Russians have no regard to civilian lives. So when it is said that every inch of Baltic territory will be defended, there must be all necessary means to defend every inch and every life. There will be only two sides in this chapter of history, the right and the other. Therefore, now is not the time for sitting on the fence or showing a mere token support to Ukraine. This is a critical test to our unity and to our future as the world's democratic community, and we simply cannot allow the right side to fail.
Thank you, and now the floor goes to the Minister of Estonia. The floor is yours.
And I would like to start by thanking Edgars also for inviting all of us to Riga tonight. And we really had a very good discussion together with their colleagues Anna-Lena and Gabrielius on different topics, but of course, most and foremost about our security situation here in the region, but more broadly in Europe. And of course, we spoke about the war in Ukraine, which was started by Russia. We also discussed about the energy security, and this is, of course, from our perspective, a very important topic at the moment. And it is clear that we need to become energy independent from Russia's energy in Europe as a whole. And firstly, from the Estonian perspective, our government has made the decision to stop buying Russian gas by the end of this year. And of course, another issue is related to climate and renewables. We believe that the steps to achieve our climate goals are directly contributing also to our energy security. We need to speed up investments into renewable energy, as renewable energy increases our energy independence and reduces also our reliance on external energy providers. As the whole at the EU, we have stood united and decisive in the European Union on imposing severe sanctions on Russia. So far, we have adopted already 5 packages of sanctions. However, as the war rages on against Ukraine and its people, we must further pressure Russia to stop this unjustified and brutal war. We have, unfortunately, really, while we are speaking, we see this war unfolding in front of our eyes with severe numbers of civilian casualties. And therefore, of course, from our perspective, we must continue to put pressure on Russia politically, economically, and also with other means, also with political isolation as much as it is possible. Therefore, also, we see that at the EU level, we need to go forward with another package of sanctions, which should include also energy carriers. Of course, we also spoke about how to support Ukraine, and we see a lot of similarities here, which is really good because Ukraine is fighting for democratic values in their country. They are paying this war with the lives of their civilians, and of course, we must continue to support Ukraine in all means possible. Most urgently, at the current stage, of course, we need to continue to provide defensive military equipment, which is very much needed at the moment. Estonia itself has given defensive aid worth for more than 220 million euros in total, and we started to provide this military equipment already before the war started. At the same time, we need also to continue to help alleviate human suffering in this terrible war. And here I would like to also say thank you to Estonian people who have really also contributed to humanitarian aid, which Estonia has given so far for 15 million euros. As Ukraine is fighting for the security of whole Europe at the moment, we also strongly support their willingness to become a member of the European Union. We see that they have this perspective, and of course we must continue to support them politically and also continue to give, of course, also economic support to them. When we speak about the EU's enlargement, then of course this is something we are going to discuss later today, but from our perspective, of course, it is important to continue to support the EU's enlargement as a whole, to clearly show that the EU has open door policy, which so far has proved to be successful, and we also support the enlargement via Western Balkan countries, particularly Macedonia and North Macedonia and Albania. Last but not least, of course, our own security and defense was one of the main topics that we also discussed. And discussing the security situation in Europe as a whole, I emphasize also that continued unity and cooperation in the EU and NATO is essential for guaranteeing our common security. We have to take care of our defense and deterrence posture. NATO's forward presence in our region needs to become forward defense. And we truly hope that by Madrid summit, allies have common understanding on this. We appreciate our cooperation with Germany as close and like-minded ally, and also highly appreciate their contribution to the collective defense in our region, including their latest reinforcements. Estonia is investing more in our defense also by ourselves, and we will raise our defense budget by up to 2.5% by the end of this year. So I stop here. Thank you one more time for fruitful discussions.
Liels paldies ministriem. Es vēlos.
Thank you very much for your statements. A joint statement by ministers will also be released in the next hours, and we will now open the floor for questions, and the floor is given to the Letter News Agency, Madam Trencher, and you can ask one question per minister only. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask the question. Mr. Nikevich, did you have an opportunity to discuss with your colleagues swift and rapid support to Ukraine given the recent events of recent days? Thank you. Well, we are constantly on the phone and coordinating our joint efforts and additional support. We didn't have a separate Baltic meeting, consultation. We only had 3+1 meeting with our German colleague. However, during our 3+1 meeting, we discussed in great detail additional support that we can still provide to Ukraine in terms of military assistance and defense assistance. I think that all three countries are providing sort of similar volumes of assistance, both military assistance and humanitarian aid. And in terms of share of the GDP, we are providing significant support. Estonia has provided 220 million euros in military support. Our defense ministry has been providing 200 million euro defense assistance. I think that Lithuania will have a similar figure as well. However, this needs to be, again, supported by greater humanitarian aid, given that a lot of people are displaced due to the shelling by the Russian armed forces. So our strategy is indeed shared by all countries in this room. We should help again as much as possible. We should tighten the screws on Russia as much as possible through sanctions, and of course should support Ukrainian refugees coming to our countries as much as possible, and of course continue thinking about our security. But we didn't have a separate discussion with my Baltic colleagues. Nevertheless, very active coordination and communication during the Easter time, in the mornings and in the evenings, via phones and other video conferencing equipment is enough. I think I'm not really communicating that frequently with my government colleagues as I am with my Lithuanian and Estonian colleagues. Thank you. The floor is given to Marin Kombrika.
Minister Baerbock, you have underlined Germany's readiness to do more to ensure the security of the Baltic states. Is it limited to the increased deployment of the German troops in Lithuania that you already mentioned and the additional deployment of air defense forces, or do you expect a further increase of troops? And a question to the minister himself. You had to wait for a long time to get the go-ahead from Germany to deliver howitzers, German howitzers to the Ukraine. Mr. Minister, you pleaded in favor of the delivery of weapons much earlier than others. Are you content with what has been supplied so far by way of military assistance to Ukraine? If more is required, we will, as I said a minute ago, do more here in the Baltic states too, because we're not only talking the security of all Baltic friends that we want to guarantee, but we're talking about Europe's shared security. We, NATO that is, will prepare and draft a new strategic concept. We're in close contact on that regard, and that is one of the reasons why I'm here today. I wanted to talk about these questions with my colleagues and counterparts about the questions here. And of course, Germany will make its contribution, the contribution that is required here. But we have already done more over the last few weeks and months than the points you just mentioned. As I said, we have increased what we've done. Ocelot, Stinger, the air defense system has been deployed to Lithuania. Additional 300 soldiers for the field of ABC defense and the respective logistics to Slovakia. This is not the Baltic area, of course, but nevertheless, it is a contribution to strengthening the eastern flank. We are there in Slovakia with the air defense system, and we assist and participate in the air space flights by NATO over Romania. We have 4 ships that participate in the VJTF mission. But I underline this is not the end of our contribution. Germany will make the contribution here on the ground that is required for our common defense, the defense of the alliance. And I'd like to underline that point. We support Ukraine together in the shared understanding shown by the Baltic states and Germany these days, because the next few days, months and years are going to be crucial, and it will be crucial for us to continue to gather our forces and stand united.
And the question for the Lithuanian colleague.
Thank you very much for this question. And for us, really, it was very important to start delivering the weapons as soon as possible, because let me recall that Russia's military build-up next to the Ukrainian border started already in October, based on the information from the intelligence. And unlikely during the previous crisis, this time we had all this information in hand, and therefore, as we have been really supporters of Ukraine also before this full-fledged war started, it was very important for us to understand the concerns of Ukraine and give also defensive military aid as soon as possible. Therefore, we tried to do it as much as we could already since the end of the year. And I assume also because Estonia is a border country like Latvia, Lithuania, we have a different sensitivity with regard to Russia's behavior. We read them differently, and therefore, most likely, sometimes we are more quick in our decisions. I think that at the moment it is very important that we have a united approach at the EU level, how we can be the best supportive for Ukrainians. And of course, as our countries, especially Estonia, is a small country, our capabilities are limited in supporting a country like Ukraine, which has more than 40 million people. Therefore, from our perspective, it is very important that we continue together, all EU 27 continue together, support Ukraine, and also continue to give military defensive aid as soon as possible. And I'm really glad that these decisions have been made by countries like Germany and other our NATO allies.
Thank you so much. TVNet news portal, the floor is yours. My question goes to Madam Baerbock. In the previous German governments have been reprimanded that they had continued to deepen economic relations and hoped for diplomatic solutions. Although we've seen episodes of unacceptable behavior on the part of Russia and also contrary to warnings given by the Baltic states, you said that this attack on Ukraine is a turning point. What kind of foreign policy you personally are going to develop vis-à-vis Russia, and what's going to be the future of Nord Stream 2?
From my point of view, pointing the finger and talking about things past are not very helpful in this present situation. What is important now is that we realize realities as they are and draw the respective conclusions from this. And at the same time, we have to accept criticism regarding Germany's position on Nord Stream 2, where we open-eyed increased our dependency on Russia. We have given gas storage facilities in the hands of Russians even after the events of 2014, and we will now have to make sure that they return to us. These were clearly mistakes we committed, and the present government has corrected these mistakes. As I said, right after I took office as foreign minister, I was very clear with regard to the need to correct and amend our position regarding Nord Stream 2. Instead of creating a new gas pipeline from Russia, actually since 2014, where we, the European Union, had already reached the point where we realized that we needed to become independent of Russian energy imports. We should have, since 2014, done what we are now doing at high speed, reduce our fossil dependency, that is, and also make sure that in the Baltic Sea too, we focus on renewable energies. Take a look at the route of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. See that it is an underground pipeline. These are all locations where we could have set up offshore wind farms, and in so doing could have ensured our own security of supply. Instead of having a Nord Stream, we should and could have had a Baltic stream of clean energy indeed, and we should have seen that happen. But as I said, this is spilt milk, and what we need to do now is to focus on what needs to be done, work with full steam to reduce our energy dependency on Russia. We have to work together, and thus it is an enormous effort, twice as big now as far as Germany is concerned, but this is what the circumstances demand of us right now. I also pointed to the new security strategy that we are in the midst of drafting with regard to adapting our ability, the ability of NATO to defend itself. We are increasing our military expenditure, and we are also aware of the special responsibility we have to respond to this crisis of immediate dependency, but also when it comes to reorienting our foreign policy to ensure that our European sovereignty is prepared in a strategic manner that avoids us ending up in new dependencies. So, as I said, I will be continuing from here to Lithuania. There we will also look to other players in the world, review our dependencies on supply chains. Thus, we have, as I said, to strategically adapt our positions and approaches so as to avoid similar dependencies, invest in critical infrastructures, and preparing the right rule book set of rules that we become less vulnerable.
And the last question from head of Deutsche Welle office in Riga.
In Moscow. A question to the Baltic Foreign Minister, Minister Landsbergis, regarding the debate about the oil embargo, a debate that is taking place in the European Union. Would you wish to see more commitment on the part of Germany? Would you wish to see Germany take the lead in this debate? And perhaps your colleagues would also like to comment.
Thank you for the question. There's no secret that Germany's position among the 27 is usually very much felt, and it drives the decision in many ways. So obviously there is a lot of anticipation as to which steps will the German government suggest that Europe could take. And we have a lot of trust in our friends and allies in Berlin that they will do the right thing. And we know that it's not easy. We understand that it's a very difficult political and economical decision that has to be explained to the people in Germany. But I think that it's, in this case, probably it's unavoidable. Just now we need to really look into how to do it. And I've heard a lot of encouraging messages from the minister today. I think that we will soon hear about very specific steps that will be taken, and we will agree with them.
For Estonia, it is an absolutely very important question at the moment, how we proceed at the EU with sanctions. And as I said before, from our perspective, it is important to put forward the sixth package of sanctions, which also should include energy carriers. And why we say that? Because as we think that aggressive Russia has become a real threat for the security of the whole Europe. Therefore, we can just not continue to finance Russia's military, Russia's war in Ukraine at the moment, because when we have put together these numbers, how much Europe pays for energy to Russia, it is more than enough to continue this war for a long time. And this is why we really advocate for having this sixth package together with energy carriers. Thank you.
You know, countries like Germany and France are the leaders of Europe. And what you expect from leaders? You expect leadership, you expect prudence, you expect balanced approach, and all of us expect victory at the end of the day. And I do believe that at the end of the day, throughout our discussions on what can be done more to support Ukraine, or what can be done more to sanction Russia and Belarus, we will reach the agreement. I can agree with both Gabrielius and Eva Maria when they are saying that we heard a lot of encouraging and frank words from Annalena. I just want to say that we do see that there is an understanding in Germany that we need to act, and we need to act quickly. But at the end of the day, let me also remind you that it's not only Germany or the Baltic states deciding on sanctions, it's all 27 member states. This is unanimous decision, and we still are hearing some noise from some capitals that they are going to veto some of our decisions. Let's not forget also this. This is not only what we decide here in Riga or in Berlin or in Vilnius or in Tallinn. This is also what Rome, what Budapest, or what Lisbon decides. It's our common decision. And I think that we will be all working together, that there are decisions that are efficient, that shows that European Union is taking global leadership when it comes to tackling Russian aggression in Ukraine. Thank you very much. I think we should
Your
now
Excellencies,
continue.
media representatives, many thanks. This concludes our press conference. Thank you very much.